This is Mars, the red planet, named for a god of war. But what if that name is a clue to the greatest cover-up in human history? What if the gods of Greece, the heroes of Rome, and the dragons of the East all came from one source? A single powerful man whose rebellion against God was so profound, it created a religion that infected the entire world. The Bible calls him a mighty hunter before the Lord. Ancient Babylon worshipped him as the god Marduk, and his story is the key to unlocking the secret origin of everything you think you know about mythology. The ancient Babylonian deity Marduk was associated with the planet Mars and was the origin of the legends and lore of that planet, as well as many later gods and heroes. Marduk originated as the apotheosis of the biblical Nimrod. The book of Genesis lists Nimrod as a descendant of Ham, the third son of Noah. After the flood, when men began to multiply once again and to establish settlements, the majority of Noah's descendants evidently settled together in the valley of Mesopotamia, though a few spread out into Palestine and northwest Africa. After about 1,000 years, exact date unspecified in the Bible, Nimrod was born in what is now Ethiopia. According to tradition, Nimrod set out to establish himself an empire and began by conquering the cities which had become established in Mesopotamia. Among these were Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in Sumeria, and in Assyria, the cities of Rehoboth, Calah, and Resen. Besides conquering these 7 cities, he also founded Nineveh. The Bible is specific in stating that he was the first man after the flood to become an emperor. He seems to have been impelled and empowered by superhuman force, and his onslaught was irresistible. Genesis 10 describes Nimrod as a mighty hunter before the Lord. The term is not complimentary, but implies ruthlessness and a lust for power. After establishing his kingdom in the Tigris-Euphrates region, Nimrod consolidated his power by establishing a state religion. He constructed a religion that included deification and worship of the emperor himself, worship of Satan and his demons, and star worship, corrupted from a pure antediluvian astronomy. A key unifying factor in his religion was to be an astrological observatory built upon the pinnacle of a pyramid, or tower, at Babel. It has been suggested that Nimrod spent some time in Egypt before moving up to Mesopotamia, and that while in Egypt, he studied the Egyptian mystery religion, perpetuated there from before the flood by the wife of Ham, whom tradition takes to be a descendant of Cain. The building of this pyramid, or ziggurat, was interrupted by God himself in order to prevent Nimrod from extending his sway over all of the inhabited earth, according to Genesis. God halted the work by confusing their language so they could no longer cooperate easily with one another, nor indeed easily inhabit the same region together. As a consequence, the human race was dispersed, and as men scattered, they carried with them remnants of primeval revelation from God, and Satan, hero worship, which Nimrod had invented as well. This system of muddled half-truths is known today to Bible scholars as the Babylonian mystery religion. From a biblical point of view, this religious system is described as the wellspring for all subsequent false religion and endless mythological systems. For example, see Isaiah 47 and Revelation chapter 17 and 18. After their deaths, Nimrod and his wife Semiramis, the ancient Queen of Heaven, were confirmed by their priests as gods and given homage as Marduk and Astarte. The name Marduk was not revealed to the masses, but his attributes were set forth under pseudonyms of various gods constructed for the public interest. Some of his alter egos include Enki, the god of wisdom, incantations, and the deep waters of the oceans. This god was also called Apsu, from which comes the name Poseidon, Astaluhi. The son of Enki, Apsu, was the god of healing and exorcism. The temple of Marduk at Babylon was called the Esagila after him. This name is the original of the Greek Aesculapius. Astaluhi was also the god of wisdom, like his father, but in addition, the god of instruction and the tutor of many of the other gods and heroes of the Babylonian pantheon. This aspect of his personality became associated with the Greek centaur Chiron, who fulfilled a similar function. The Titan Atlas also derives his name and personality from this god. Bel-Baal. This was the primary name by which other nations, including Israel, were introduced to the worship of Marduk. Baal means lord or master. Under this name, with many prefixes and suffixes, he was worshipped by the Canaanites, Phoenicians, Syrians, and to some extent by the Egyptians. Later, the Greeks associated him with Hercules under the name Melkarth, which is a transliteration of Marduk. The name Baal sometimes occurs in connection with a locality such as Baal Peor or Baal Hermon. More frequently, it occurs with compound attributes such as Baal Zebub, Lord of the Flies. Still today, one of the epithets of Satan, Baal Zephon, later to be the god Triton, means Lord of the Black North or the Northern Void, and Meribal translates as Lord of the Rebellion. Nabal Nebo the Prophet. This god was the son of Marduk, associated with prophecy received by singing, chanting, and muttering in other tongues, as well as oracles. He was the original of both Apollo, Nabal, and Hermes, as the Greeks knew them. The names Nabal and Bel were the official names of Nimrod Marduk in later periods and were popular in later periods among the ruling classes of Babylon as name elements, as in Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. As a note on the Babylonian mystery religion, the original cult of the mother and child, Semiramis and Tammuz, became later Isis and Osiris, Venus and Adonis, the Madonna and child in various cultures down to this day. There is one common element to Nimrod Marduk in all his manifestations, and that is the symbol of the snake, serpent, dragon. Nimrod took the dragon as his personal emblem, so that from him spring various dragon myths and their special association with apocalyptic events. Strikingly, the only favorable accounts of dragons are found among the Hamitic peoples of the world, like Nimrod, including the Ethiopians, Hittites, Chinese, Japanese, and American Indian. The thread of serpent lore is evident in all of Marduk's guises, regardless of nation, pantheon, or role. Poseidon was accompanied by creatures who were half man and half snake, as well as by the sea serpent Leviathan, mentioned in Job. Aesculapius, Chiron, Hermes were all associated with the caduceus of entwined serpents. The story of Apollo and the Python is well known as that of Hercules, Melkarth, and the Hydra. The god Triton was half snake. That the worship of Nimrod and Semiramis is the origin of all the pagan systems on earth is well documented by Alexander Hislop in his book, The Two Babylons, which contains many sound facts in spite of the author's anti-Roman Catholic sentiments, which appear to some readers as too strong. The Bible reveals that the ultimate source of all this evil is not to be sought in Nimrod the man, the first of the post-flood antichrists, but rather in the evil character of the one who possessed him, namely Satan. In many passages throughout the Bible, the following associations are made about Satan: the serpent in Eden, Leviathan the sea monster, the dragon, that ancient serpent, the god of this age, the king of Babylon, the king of Tyre, Phoenicia, the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, the father of lies, the prince of the power of the air, etc. In Isaiah 14, he is spoken of as the instigator of war in the heavens, space, by attempting to ascend to the sides of the north in order to seat himself upon the throne of God and thus to rule the universe. Thus, he is the Lord of the rebellion and Lord of the black void of the north. The primeval astronomy, of which Babylonian astrology, still extant today, was a corruption, was based on the realization that the entire universe was created and had worth only in relation to the earth. Thus, the ancients saw it as no accident that the stars and planets were set in a certain order by God at creation. See the classic books by Sayce and Bullinger on this subject. The antediluvian patriarchs developed a system of constellations to serve as perpetual reminders of man's fall and the promise of a coming Redeemer, as well as a record of the angelic conflict down through the ages. At the most prominent place in the heavens, the patriarchs placed the constellation Draco, the dragon, which lies coiled about that point of the sky they called absolute north. This is the center of the circle, which the Earth's North Pole describes in the sky every 25,158 years. About 4000 BC, the star Iota Draconis was the nearest visible star to the North Pole, while about 3000 BC the North Pole centered exactly on the star Alpha Draconis, also called Thuban, the brightest star in the constellation. This portion of the dragon is depicted as attempting to encoil the constellation Ursa Minor, which was originally called the Little Flock, or Little Sheepfold. namely, the faithful remnant of Israel, or the people of God. We find this exact picture written in the prose of the book of Revelation, chapter 12, describing events yet to be enacted in human history. That is, the most devastating battle of all is yet to be fought on earth and in space: the heavens. The pole star today is of course Polaris in Ursa Minor, and will next enter the constellation Cepheus, which constellation pictures God as the triumphant king over all the earth. It is also notable that in primeval astronomy, the dragon's head is shown as being crushed under the foot of a hero who at the same time is using a club to beat to death the Hydra who has stolen the fruit of immortality. Head to head with this hero, set in mirror image across from him, is a second hero grappling with a huge snake whose gaping jaws are straining to grasp Corona Borealis, the crown of the north. This second hero is also crushing a vile enemy underfoot. This time, it is the scorpion. Yet even as he does this, another scorpion bites his heel. This early configuration of the constellations around the North Pole was derived from biblical ideas about the events recorded much later in Genesis. The Babylonian creation epic describes Marduk leading a rebellion of the gods against Tiamat, who has planned destruction for them. The Hebrew cognate for Tiamat is Tiham, used in the Bible only to describe the deep upon which God moved at the beginning of creation. Later, a part of the Tehom was imprisoned within the bowels of the earth in Jewish rabbinical tradition and opened to release the waters from below. At the same time, the vapor canopy collapsed during the flood in order to destroy the civilization of Noah's day. This destruction is said to have come about because on excessive influence by Satan in the affairs of men, such as intermarriage with mortals producing giants on the earth with various genetic defects of a serious nature. In the Babylonian version, Marduk wins and is eulogized by the other gods in a list of 50 names to which can be traced most of the gods of antiquity. This epic was read aloud every New Year's Day in Babylon in front of the statue of Marduk. New Year's Day was the most important day of the Babylonian calendar, and during the ceremonies, the statues of Marduk and his son Nabal were carried to a special shrine outside of the city where Marduk would prophesy and Nabal would interpret his words, the beast and false prophet imagery of Revelation L3. The statue of Marduk and its attendant regalia were captured by conquerors several times, and their return was always connected with reincarnation and the resumption of his rule over the earth. Marduk was the great god of war, and only once in all his battles was he wounded when his helmet slipped from his head. As a result, he received a fatal blow, but being a god, reincarnated himself. It was in his warrior aspect that he was related to Mars, the god of war. The Bible speaks of Satan temporarily regaining rule over the earth at the end of our present age through the beast and the false prophet. The first is a civil military leader in Europe or the West. The latter is a false messiah in Israel in all probability. The latter is thought to be a religious as opposed to secular leader. These two will make war on the people of God, and the false prophet will proclaim himself to be God in the third temple in Jerusalem. See Matthew 24, at which point earth will enter a period known as the time of Jacob's trouble, spoken of by the Hebrew prophets, or the 3 to 12 year Great Tribulation known to Christians. At the conclusion of this catastrophic time when most life on earth is destroyed, Jesus will return to the Mount of Olives to usher in a millennial kingdom during which time Satan will be bound and removed from influence on earth. Is it then a coincidence that our computer conference has now come to believe that we may have found the image of an angelic malevolent being on Mars, a planet which appears to be scarred by an ancient war in the heavens? Is it a coincidence that we should find out such things as these as our own planet enters times of momentous problems beyond the capabilities of mere men to solve? The syllable MR. It is remarkable that there is a syllable with the consonant value MR, which is found everywhere in connection with the planet Mars, the god of Mars, and its associated emblem, the dragon. The source of all these words is to be found in the Semitic root Mara, MR, which in Hebrew means bitterness as well as disobedience. From this root is derived Marad, MRD, or rebellion, which is the original both of Nimrod, the Babylonian Ninmir-Rud, or NMRD, as well as Marduk, Merodach, MRDK. The Bible tells us that Nimrod was the founder of Nineveh, and Nineveh's own half-legendary history ascribes that honor to one Ninur, or Nimur, NMR. Marduk was the original in both name and character of the gods Mercury, MRKR, and Mars, MRTS, from which, of course, we derive the current names of these planets. It is notable that Mercury, like Mars, is also battle-scarred. Under the name Apsu, PS, Marduk became Poseidon, PSDN, who founded Atlantis, which was named after his son, Atlas, TLS, the Babylonian Astaluhi, STL. Atlantis was overthrown in the throes of a great war bringing destruction and dissolution upon the land. The only remnant of Atlantis was the island Hesperus, Spur, upon which lived a dragon in possession of the fruit of the tree of life, immortality. This fruit was stolen by the god Hercules Melkarth, MLKRT, a pseudonym of Marduk, MRDK. The people of Atlantis, called Merodes, MRD, were descendants of Meru, MR, or Merod, MRD. The Nubians tell of an island called Meru, upon which were built pyramids by a race of red men. This legend came to the Hindus as the five-sided mountain they call Meru, MR, ruled over by Indra, NMDR, who was the mouthpiece of God and himself a god. He conquered 7 cities and ruled over the earth in Hindu mythology. Meru was a five-sided mountain from which the heavens were suspended with the pole star as its apex. This is the reason Asian temples are built in the shape of a mountain having a flame at the summit. Here also we see Atlas, who became a mountain and bore the heavens on his shoulders, relieved only once by Hercules Melkarth. Tibetan legend tells of the fall of the land of 7 cities by earthquake and eruption at the fall of the star Bel, Mars. The people perished, it is said, because they ignored the warnings of their priest, Mu, M. Another lost continent myth is that of Mu or Lemuria, LMR, which was publicized by James Churchward in the 19th century. According to him, Mu was situated in the Pacific Ocean and bore a population of 64 million people of assorted colors and tribes. Mu sank when gas-filled caverns in the earth beneath collapsed. The survivors founded colonies in Micronesia, China, and Egypt, but the only place they flourished was in Central America, where they are said to have produced great Indian cultures. This may seem to be an insubstantial myth until one considers a modern-day popular religion, Mormonism. Mormonism is founded upon the supposed revelation to Joseph Smith of a set of golden tablets by the angel Moroni, Marin, who had once been a human prophet to the great cities of Central America, said to have been founded by refugees from the Tower of Babel. Babel means the gate of God, and also confusion. Moroni's warnings went unheeded, and so they perished, but his prophecies were supposed to have been written down and given to Smith. This Moroni, from whom the Mormons are named, identifies himself with Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan, the winged serpent and hero god who brought civilization to the Aztecs and returned home on a raft of snakes over the sea. The intricate tapestry woven from the threads of Nimrod, Marduk, and the planet Mars presents a conclusion far more profound and unsettling than a mere historical or mythological curiosity. It proposes a unified field theory of rebellion, a grand narrative where history, theology, and celestial symbolism converge to describe a single, enduring conflict between divine order and human or superhuman ambition. The story that begins with a mighty hunter before the Lord in the plains of Shinar and culminates in a battle-scarred red planet in our sky is not a series of disconnected legends, but the fragmented global memory of a foundational schism that has shaped the spiritual landscape of humanity. At the heart of this conclusion is the figure of Nimrod, the archetypal empire builder and the first post-diluvian tyrant. He is not merely a powerful king, but the vessel for a primordial spirit of defiance. His empire, founded on conquest and consolidated through a fabricated religious system, represents humanity's first organized attempt to reclaim the pre-flood unity of Babel on its own terms, independent of God. The Tower of Babel was not just an architectural folly, it was the spiritual and technological command center of this rebellion, an attempt to storm the heavens by human ingenuity and demonic pact. God's confounding of the languages was, therefore, not a petty punishment, but a necessary act of divine quarantine, a merciful fragmentation of a concentrated evil that, if left unchecked, would have consumed the entire world. The subsequent dispersal of humanity became the mechanism by which the Babylonian mystery religion, a syncretic blend of corrupted truth, emperor worship, and satanic lore, was seeded across the globe. This is where the apotheosis of Nimrod into the god Marduk becomes critical. Marduk is not simply a new god invented by the Babylonians. He is the institutionalization of Nimrod's rebellious spirit. The myriad alter egos of Marduk, Enki, Apsu, the lord of the deep, Astaluhi, Aesculapius, the god of forbidden knowledge, Baal, the dominating lord, Nabul, Nebo, Apollo, the god of occult prophecy, demonstrate how this core spirit of rebellion is fractal, adapting to every culture and filling every niche of human need and fear. The common denominator, the Mr syllable, echoing in names from Merodach to Mars, from Meru to Moroni, is the linguistic fingerprint of this bitter rebellion. It is the brand of the original revolt, a sound that carries the memory of Babel across millennia and continents. The consistent symbolism of the serpent or dragon, from the python of Apollo to the hydra of Hercules, and the leviathan of Poseidon, binds this entire narrative together. It consciously and deliberately links the entire Mardukian religious complex back to the original deceiver in Eden, the ancient serpent. This is not a coincidence of myth-making, but a theological statement. The force that empowered Nimrod, that was worshipped as Marduk, and that is prophesied to return in the beast and false prophet, is one and the same as the entity that first tempted humanity to defy its creator. The war that began in a garden is the same war fought at Babel, celebrated in the Enuma Elish, and prophesied in Revelation. This leads to the most staggering implication of this unified narrative, the celestial dimension. The association of Marduk with the planet Mars is not arbitrary astrological symbolism. When viewed through this lens, the war god planet, with its ominous red hue and its surface scarred by what appear to be cataclysmic events, becomes a cosmic monument to this rebellion. The ancient astronomical knowledge that placed the dragon, Draco, coiled around the absolute north pole of the sky, was preserving a profound spiritual truth, that the ultimate source of evil aspires to the very throne of God. I will ascend to the sides of the north. Isaiah 14:13. The discovery of anomalous features on Mars, such as the face, within this interpretive framework, is therefore deeply provocative. It forces the question, is Mars merely a dead world, or is it a silent testament to an ancient celestial conflict, a first strike in the rebellion that later manifested on Earth at Babel? The planet's desolation serves as a sobering warning of the ultimate end of defiance against the divine order. In conclusion, the journey from Nimrod to Marduk to Mars is ultimately the story of a single, enduring heresy, the desire to dethrone God and deify man, orchestrated by the god of this age. This Babylonian system is the source code of all pagan religion, the underlying architecture behind every mythology that glorifies power, secret knowledge, and salvation through human or demigod effort. It is a system that has continually reincarnated itself throughout history, from the cults of the ancient world to the totalitarian ideologies and New Age syncretisms of the modern era. Therefore, the ultimate significance of this investigation is not simply to solve an archaeological or astronomical puzzle. It is to recognize the pattern, the biblical prophecy of a final Babylon that rises to global dominance before its ultimate destruction. Revelation 17:18 indicates that this ancient spirit of Marduk, Nimrod, is destined for one last terrible manifestation. The warning encoded in the myths, the scriptures, and even the scarred face of Mars is that humanity, when unified in rebellion apart from God, inevitably builds a new Babel. To understand the deep, symbolic connection between the first empire builder, the god of Babylon, and the Red Planet is to be equipped with a profound hermeneutic for understanding history, current events, and the spiritual war that rages behind the veil of our reality. The story of Marduk is not over. It is merely awaiting its final, apocalyptic act. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. I love hearing from you. Check out more videos on the screen, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.